Hey, Patty. All right. Hi, Patty. Nice to see you. We'll give maybe another minute and see if anyone else hops on. Otherwise, we will go ahead and jump in. I'm pulling up the group questions right now. Let's see. My Facebook is not wanting to reload. Doesn't want to move the screen. That would help. Might have to pull it up from my phone. Okay, just so we can optimize the amount of time that we have, I'm going to go ahead and start, and then as people make their way in, they can just join us. So, sorry, as I'm getting all the browsers open. Okay, so this week was week 4. And the homework for the week was to try a family style meal. I know that some of you are already familiar with this. Some of you have not done family style meals before and you're more comfortable and familiar with pre-plating your kids' foods, which is not bad. I mean, I do it often, especially like at breakfast and lunch as well. Family style meals is just a different technique to try in case you kind of find yourself in a rut and need to try something new. And so while I kind of debated, introducing this a little bit earlier, I really like for families to kind of get down the basis of the framework for the division of responsibility and for Love It, Like It, Learning It, to kind of see how that flows and how that goes at meal times. But I do think introducing a family style meal with that is a very effective approach. And if any of you tried it, you probably saw that it helped kind of change the feeding dynamic a little bit, and hopefully for the better. Oftentimes, the picky eating develops at the same time that our kids are developing their independence, their autonomy, and really wanting that sense of control, which often plays out in the feeding relationship, since food is something that kids think they can control. And so oftentimes when we pre-plate their food, kids can inadvertently observe that as a form of control, whether or not we're intending to manipulate food or not. The other side of that is kids have a very visual understanding of what's available to them. And so I think it's in next week's homework, we're going to talk about, hey, Julie, nice to see you. So next week's homework, we'll talk about what to do if they only eat their Love It foods. And then the last week of this series, we'll talk about how to help kids with Learning It foods. So with that, so I'm pulling up the Facebook page on my phone because it's not working from my computer. And so, so with that though, we know that with family style meals, kids, on the note of, as a note of them understanding how much is available to them, kids get to see this is what's an option at the meal. So if there's a bowl of strawberries out, that is what is available at that meal. And so if there's more available, kids can start to learn the dynamics of passing the elements at a meal, which is just a common, behavioral manners that we want them to learn. And then also they start to learn how to ask other people for more before they clear out the bowl and things like that. So family style meals can just help that aspect of kids understanding where there's abundance and where there's not a lot of extras, and how to relate with the people at the table for more. That being said, the flip side is, as parents, we also get to see this is how much we're going to put out at a meal because this is how much I'm comfortable with having for my family. So like just an obvious one that comes to mind is like bread. My kids would eat a loaf of bread each at dinner and probably eat no other elements if I offered it. But I'm not going to make a loaf of bread for 2 adults and 2 kids, and I can't even eat bread. So you know what I'm saying? So I'll make something that I think is an appropriate amount for our family that they can all share and divide up. But I'm not going to make an excessive amount. And it's the same thing with the strawberry example. If I know we have 2 containers of strawberry for the week, but that's like I just went grocery shopping, that's all we have, I'm probably not going to put all strawberries out at one meal because I don't want us to burn through all the strawberries where we very well could. So we can kind of chat through that a little bit more next week. But on the topic of this week's homework being family style meals, I hope if you've been able to practice that yet, you just kind of got a little bit better understanding of how it complements the division of responsibility and how it complements Love It, Like It, Learning It, and helping pass the elements. I'm going to bring up the question because Julie, I see you're on the call and it seems like kind of a fitting time to bring up your question, and then we'll go through all the questions from the group for the week. But if I remember correctly, I don't know what it is with my social media today. It will not load anything on my phone or on my computer. So let's see if I can get up that group box, because even my Instagram won't start today. Sorry for the delay here. Julie, since you're on the call, if you want to, sorry, I know you're eating, so I don't want to cut you off mid-bite.
Totally fine. I just don't remember what I asked. So
that's okay. I just got it. It's just really slow to load today. Like, I don't know why it's not showing this. I can see there's 20 comments, and I can see none of them. I don't know what it is, but if I remember correctly, if I can get this up, you asked, one second, real quick. I know you asked a question about food pokers, but the question that I thought would be more applicable to right now had to do with, what's your one earlier in the week, I think? Yes, so this is one you and I had talked about, I guess in a different one, but what do I do if my daughter won't leave learning at Foods on Her Plate? We made the cashew chicken tonight and it was so good. What my daughter, 2.5 years old, did was what she usually does. She takes everything she didn't like off of her plate, totally freaked out if anything else she didn't want was touching the stuff she did want. Find it really irritating, like why can't she just keep the food on her plate even if she doesn't want it? We've all, I'm sure, well, speaking for myself, I'm sure we've all been there. Thoughts, I worry that if she removes all the food she doesn't want, she won't be exposed to it in a neutral way. So that was the first question. We'll try and go through all the questions in the week. But I thought that this would be a good time to bring up it in light of family style meals, because whether we pre-plate, I mean, oftentimes if we pre-plate our kids' food, we might see, and so I think that was actually my question. Yes, I don't know. So I had commented on that question to see if you, when she did that, did you pre-plate her food or was that her self-serving it?
I'm pretty sure it was pre-plated, but that was like when we started this program, and since it's sort of changed because we've implemented having her keep everything on her plate, and she's like usually fine with that if I separate the foods as much as I can. Okay. We typically cook we get sun baskets, so it's usually like a big mixed up meal of some sort, and then so I've been trying to separate them a little bit more, and so I don't know. So it's not as much of an issue, but it's pretty rare that she serves herself because I don't actually know how that would work. Okay. So I think this brings up a lot of topics actually that I think are fitting for this week's conversation that I'd like to chat on. And a few of that, one, I totally get what you mean, because one pot meals and all of that can just be very challenging with kids who are more particular. I'm sure all of us, if we have several kids and we might see one kid doesn't mind all of it being together, one kid who's the more apprehensive eater is going to be like, oh my gosh, things are mixed, things are touched. So even if I like the noodles, I can't touch the pasta because it's touching all this other stuff and it's now game over. And so unfortunately, that tends to be a part of this process. I always want parents to say our goal is to get them to eating combined foods, but oftentimes we do have to separate it out if we're trying to make one meal for the whole family. It's still one meal for the whole family, but if we can get in the habit of separating it out, or you offer it whole and you just offer, fruit and milk on the side, some bread on the side, or you offer something else and keep it in its whole composed form. But if we can deconstruct it, oftentimes it can get, and I think that maybe I'm mixing this up with something else. Maybe this was something else where I got this question, and there's been lots of questions coming this week. I think it was actually in a Facebook Live I did yesterday, but talking about do we need to separate it out? And so you don't have to. There's definitely been nights I've mixed sauce in with the spaghetti and then been okay, I was moving too fast. I know my oldest is going to want the noodles plain. It just is what it is. I mean, there's going to be times that they're offered food at someone else's house and they can't separate it out and things like that. So we need to help our kids understand how to cope. That being said, the reason I asked you about pre-plating is because kids do tend to respond better if they dish it up themselves. They're just less offended that it's already on their plate, things like that. So with the family style meals, if we can, and I know it's not realistic every night, but I also want families to know
Carrie posted a beautiful picture of her salad platter, and I love a good spread out salad platter. That being said, like, you can throw the container of feta, the container of like lettuce in a clamshell, the tomato container, if you've washed it or not, up to you. Like, you can throw all the elements on a table and just have it be free for all. This does not have to be fancy. And so family style is just, and Julie, it might have been, did you ask me about the table? The table size, was that you? Okay, clearly I'm just mixing this up. Sorry, I've been getting lots of questions on this topic. So I've had people say, like, my table is small, family style is like way too crammed. You can do it at the counter. Like, when you have all the elements out to make the meal, you can have your kid up at the counter, give them a stool or hold them on your hip and let them serve at the counter. This does not have to be like a Thanksgiving spread on the table. If you can, that's sometimes helpful, because then you can just kind of get the show moving while everyone's already seated. You help them learn how to like pass the elements, ask for more, things like that. But it works just as well at the counter if needed, because the goal here is to get kids to tolerate it on their plate. So we've talked a little bit about this, and we'll talk mostly about it in week 6. But when we talk about the steps to eating and getting a child to learn to like a new food, the first step is to get them to tolerate it. And sometimes that's just as much as like they can tolerate that it's even an aspect at the meal. But a step to eating past that would be getting them to tolerate it on their plate. So some strategies for this might be divided plates. I know in previous weeks, people have asked, do we have to use these divided plates? We see them all over Instagram because they're cute and they photograph well, but they are not necessary. Like, I am big on, I think families should try and use a variety of plates. I think divided plates are cute, they're functional, kids seem to like them, but we also don't want a child to learn to only be able to eat off of a divided plate, because obviously in life there's going to be foods that are touched and are just on a standard plate. So I think if you can intermingle them with a plate that's just a typical saucer plate and divided plates, but if you think that might help, especially in this process, to keep things separated out, I personally like them less to keep food separated and more to just remind me, offer more options. Because on a single saucer, it'd be really easy to just offer a Love It food. But if I see a 3-compartment plate or a 4-compartment plate, same way with a lunchbox, like a bento box, it gives us the visual reminder, I should probably give more options here. And so that can just be a helpful reminder why I personally like the divided plates, but it's not necessary. So Julie, going back to your question, I think if you could try, and I know you said it's shifted a little and she's starting to adjust and she's starting to accept more foods on her plate, which is great, because again, when we can bring up the diagram, let me see if I can screen share it. I'll see if I can bring it up. But with the steps to eating, if we can get them to tolerate it on their plate, then the next step would be, and this actually flows into your next question, the next step would be, can we get them to interact with their food? Are they willing to smell their food, touch their food, taste their food? And we get closer to getting them to eat their food. And so oftentimes we want them to jump from they tolerate, then they eat it. But that is a big jump, as we will talk about often. Why is this not showing up right now? Let me just see real quick if I can do this as screen share.
So would you say if it's been like a week of maybe my daughter tolerating the foods just like on our plate, maybe that's too much time, then I would try to like play games with it, like does this smell sweet or sour, or like,
yeah, no, that's a great question. And sorry, you said if it's been a week of it being on her plate but nothing's happened with it, you mean?
Yeah, I think one of my frustrations from this week is just like, it was a big win to get her to keep the food on her plate, but now I'm like, okay, she's still like not really eating things. Like the salad night, it was okay because she like ate maybe like a sliver of a cucumber, which she used to like, and now I think she got sick of it. But then she had like so many of those Brazil breads, which of course, like they're so good,
Right.
But I was kind of like so much bread. I don't know, like just. Sure. I don't want you to just eat bread all the time.
So, no, I totally get what you mean with this. So a few notes on that. First, I'll speak from personal experience because we do salads here all the time. And I will say until I started separating out the salads, not like normally I just like put them in a salad bowl, put everything in there, dish it up. And like my kids would never want it. And like, again, everything touching. As soon as I started spreading it out, then they'd start to pick the vegetables that they were liking or would love. But over time, and don't get me wrong, like my daughter would still eat an entire bag of Razzie Bites if I let her, like she still loves them. So that's where I come to that was specifically what I was talking about earlier when I said think through how much bread you want to offer at a meal. Like if you're going to make 3 per person, well, they get their 3 and then that's all you made. If they're, want 10 per person, well, you might not choose to make that many, so everyone has that many. But on the note of progression, the Razzie Bites are what get my daughter excited about salad night and what makes her say, this is my favorite dinner. If salad night is her favorite dinner because of a roll, there is theory that eating begets eating. I don't always believe that from personal experience, but because sometimes she will just eat a roll and be done. That said, now she will eat raw spinach just on its own. And again, she's 5, so don't think this was an overnight success story because she's a dietitian's kid. This took a lot of time and practice, but I just encourage you with that example because it does take time and practice. But I think as she starts to get more and more comfortable, at this point, the fact that she was so offended by it being on her plate, you're at a pretty beginning stage of the steps for eating. That at the beginning, she was just tolerating it. And so going into one of your questions and another topic with family style meals is how can we get them to interact with it? If she won't tolerate it being on her plate, ask her to dish it onto yours. Have serving utensils. And again, this does not need to be fancy, but if you do have it out on the counter or out on the table and you would need a serving spoon or tongs or something like that, ask them, can you put a spoonful of, spinach on my plate? Do you want to put a spoonful of spinach on yours? And let them do that. Because again, there's a barrier between them having to touch it. So it's more comfortable. And this is where I was going to get into your question on food picks. But if we can get them to interact with it using a utensil to serve someone else, soon after you should start to see, okay, now they're starting to serve themselves. So not only will she tolerate it on her plate if I put it there, but she's willing to interact with it enough to initiate putting it on her own plate. Again, she may not be eating it yet, but we have to see this in very granular steps because unfortunately it may take kids 10 to 20 exposures. We just assume if we show it to them and we offer it 10 to 20 times, they're going to move through this pathway. And that's where we do see oftentimes most of the kids I work with need a lot of facilitation to get there. They're not just magically going to be oh, my magic number between 10 and 20 is hit and I love this food now. Most kids need some help, some, encouragement to, like you said, smell it and be does the feta smell like anything? And they may say it's stinky, and you'd be well, is it sweet or salty? And if they're willing to taste it and things like that. So you can start to move them through this pathway, but oftentimes if you can't get them to tolerate it being on their plate, you won't get them to dish it out, to you or to them. If you can't get them to dish it out, you're very unlikely to get them to pick it up, smell it, or taste it. And if you can't, or touch it. And so if you can just kind of think through it the sequential, the closer and closer you get to tastes, now, again, she's 5. This has been the most painfully practical examples for me to have to go through in my own life with my oldest. But she's willing to taste most things now. That has taken a long time. I thought just the forced bite would, and we don't force bites here because I don't want it to be a negative association to all the foods that I force her to taste. But it's taken a long time to get her to taste it. But now she's willing to initiate the taste, chew, swallow, talk about it, and then decide if she's going to eat it or not. But again, it can be a slow process. But where I'm going with this and kind of tying in what you said before, and I want to get some of the other questions, but when you talk about the sun basket and things like that, it can be a slow process of having to get really granular, whether it be with the steps to eating or the way that you're offering the food. But when you think of if you have a 5-year-old who you need to be in quiet time, speaking of 5-year-olds. Okay, thank you. It's not over yet. Sorry, they have 1 hour of quiet time that's paced right around this. But and so if you can get a child by kindergarten age tolerating, accepting, eating most of the foods that you're offering, and I'm just saying kindergarten age because I know your daughter's age kind of thing, but if we can, get kids accepting anything that's in that sunbasket by age 8 or 10 even, and I'm only lengthening that out because of the starting place I know some people are coming from. Obviously, if your kid starts a little older, has a little more habits ingrained in them, it's going to take them a little bit longer to get to this point. But if we can get kids eating well-rounded, nourishing diets before they get into puberty, like we've made a big win. So right now I know that we want to see her like chomping on cucumber, eating spinach, loving salad night. But try and think like if I have a first grader who's loving salad, I have done well, you know, but it's going to take some progress versus I deal with lots of families who haven't approached this yet. And I know a lot of the families in this group, some of the children are a little bit older, and it just, you know, one, you have to overcome more of the behaviors that have set in, but two, it's just a little bit later in the game kind of thing. So with that, on the mention of you saying like food picks, I would say, one, if you do, for those of you who are on Instagram, Dashlyn makes like the most adorable food picks. You guys have probably seen me tag them before because they're darling little handmade vegetables and fruits and all sorts of stuff. They're very cute. And they're my girls' favorites. They're like a little two-pronged. You can get very inexpensive like cocktail picks. I don't particularly like toothpicks. They're kind of tricky and the food often falls off of them, but like those little two-pronged picks that you might see like for olives or something like that are a great option as well. But going to your question, just offer them like with her fork or something like that. And then just let her, because the novelty wins kids over. So the more you can introduce novelty, whether it be a divided plate or a dill bug plate where you get to like personalize it and everything like that, or the more you can let them like want to interact with it because they have a tool that makes them want to interact with it, the more likely you are to get them to work through this pathway. Does that help, Julie? Okay. All right. Patty, Sandy, let me know if you guys have any questions on the things that we've discussed so far. I'm going to scroll back and go through some of the other questions. So Dashlyn wrote, do you rotate the learning food group? Like, for example, I give my daughter a carb. She is learning. Do I plan the next meal to give it a Love It carb? So this is where like the advanced template that I think it was last week and the week before that we were working on, the more that you can rotate through and kind of think like, and this is not like set, but if you can start applying that to like a meal plan, so you kind of start to see, yes, like ideally we don't want the Love It food at every meal to be a carb because we want them to eat from a variety of food groups. So if you know that some carb is a like it food, offer that at a different time. That said, if your kid only likes carbs, that's going to be kind of what your starting place is, but we still need to try and get in some other, is it not screen sharing anymore? Okay, sorry.
It is screen sharing.
A lot of pressure.
Oh, do you know? Is that what you said? Okay.
I just wasn't sure if you wanted to show your Facebook or not. But.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. So this is the group question page. Thank you though for letting me know. Sorry, I was reading it quickly and read it wrong. I don't know that it's helpful for you guys to really see it, but I'll leave it up in case you guys wonder what questions. So in short, Dashlyn, I would say, I know she's not on the call, but for the recording, I would say yes, as much as possible, rotate through. Knowing that for many of us, the Love It food is rarely going to be a vegetable. That still means offer a vegetable. Try and offer a vegetable as many times as you can. And I don't mean offer cucumber 4 times a day. I mean like offer a different vegetable at every meal and snack that you feel that is not stressful to do so, but that you could toss one in there. Because the more exposure we give them, the more that we can keep getting them to tolerate, being willing to interact with, and the more we can, not just put it on their plate and then let it end up right immediately in the trash, but the more that we can put it on their plate and help get them to interact, smell, touch, and taste it, the more we're going to get towards, in case I chopped off the most important part, like we're getting up towards eating. So, okay, I'm going to get to Cecilia's before we finish because I think it's important to address the feelings of defeat. Okay, and then I want to get, I think Carrie had 2 questions. Okay, so on this question with dessert with dinner, I know there were some conversations on the group page about this this week, but it was fun to see, especially I know Carrie kind of shared, she did it, her and her husband, I think were kind of questioning my judgment call on that of like, this is insane. And then to see it really does dissipate. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read the comments on this, but if you haven't, just for the sake of time, I would encourage you to do so because I do encourage, if it's a dessert night and if it's a night that you have decided, yeah, we're going to have dessert tonight, to, when it makes sense, go ahead and offer it with dinner so that it does kind of take it off the pedestal. It takes their fixation off of that. So I think the more that you can do that, Oftentimes parents will see they may eat it first, but then they're over it and then they start eating their food. Or they may eat some of it, eat their food, and come back to it. My daughter, who has a very pronounced sweet tooth, she's recently started kind of like, I'm going to save that to the end, which I'm like, do that, so it's like, she was definitely the one who like wanted to only eat that at the beginning, but then it's like come along. So again, it's a process, but I think if we can kind of take it off the pedestal, take it off the temptation of wanting to use it as leverage to get them to eat, which would conflict with, other aspects of what we're doing with the division of responsibility, as much as possible, try and do that. And on the topic of how much to serve, similar to the roll, serve what you think is enough for everyone to get to enjoy. We don't want to be restricting and give everyone like a morsel and like just tease everyone. But I wouldn't say have this be like free for all, because again, it's part of dinner. It is not dinner. So 1 brownie per person. And if you want to offer them, when we talk about like offering kids for forbidden foods, quote unquote, like more frequently, I would say the abundance there needs to come in the frequency that we offer that. So they can have a brownie one day at dinner, and if you still have more brownies left, they can have one at snack. And at snack, if they want a little more, you can give them more. But we don't necessarily want to just, encourage them to sit with the pan of brownies in front of them at a family style meal. But if we can get them to realize like this is not a forbidden food, you're able to have it at plenty of different opportunities. And that's what I would recommend. And so she said, and so in that link that I put on the Facebook page right here, there's different like script suggestions for what to say and how to handle that, like in a variety of situations. So I encourage, if that's something that you're interested in, check out that post. I think she shared more. Yeah, they went back and forth about what this actually looked like, if anyone is interested. Carrie also asked, please, in your suggested script to say, please put a little of everything on your plate. What do you do if your child refuses or says they don't? So kind of going back to what we said before, we just want to get them to tolerate it. And if they're not willing to at the beginning, that's okay. Because I would say if they know that this is like a pressure-free, positive feeding environment, and they start to like realize how you're going to react when they act a certain way, I think that they're going to start to have less anxiety about it, and that'll get them to start tolerating it quicker. So definitely, if your child isn't tolerating it, first question, as I mentioned on your question, Julie, was, are you pre-plating it, or is this something that they're plating? And if you're pre-plating it, encourage them to pre-plate it. If they still won't put it on their plate, and this still happens, even in my family, we've been doing this like for forever. Sometimes they're still, just butting of heads. No, I do not want that on my plate. I'm not going to push it, because I'm not going to make any progress if I force it on their plate. They're just going to be upset about it. They're going to be offended. They're going to react more poorly to it. So if it's a big pushback, I just drop it and move on. There's other things that they can learn to like at the meal. And they can still learn it based off how I'm eating it. And I can still role model that I'm enjoying it. And there's been times where they don't want it on their plate, and then my husband and I'll eat it like a dinosaur or something. And then they're like, well, I want one. And they'll reach over and get one. So I would say don't push it, because that can derail the feeding environment very quickly. It can make our parent, attitude towards the meal go downhill very quickly. That said, you can also ask them, as we said before, you can ask them to serve you and put it on your plate. So I would say it, kind of address that as the first step. The last question, then I'll open it up for a few minutes to any questions you guys still have, was from Cecilia. And again, some good conversation here. Carrie was sweet to just encourage Cecilia on some of the discouragement that she was feeling, kind of like, okay, he only eats the love it foods and occasionally ventures out into the like it foods, but has not once touched the learn it food. I know dinners are a hit or miss, as he eats well all day at daycare, but weekends are no exception. So I appreciate all the positivity in the group, and I appreciate getting to see you ladies on the call and things like that. But I know that there's also several group members who aren't sharing on the Facebook group or joining the live chats. And so I just want to, take a minute to say, like, if this isn't going over well for them, or if they're, I know everyone has different schedules and things like that. So I know many people are listening to their recording and just may have the personality type where that they don't want to like chime in as much, or they might just not be able to keep up, or they're feeling discouraged, or whatever it might be. I just want to put this out there that this place, like this Facebook group and this community, is intended to support you. If everything's going great, that obviously makes me very excited, and I'm thrilled to cheer you on and celebrate. That being said, if you're feeling defeated, I also would really like to hear, because it's helpful for me to know what challenges you guys are coming up with, when there's hiccups in the process, when you're not seeing wins in the way that you would expect. It helps me know, one, your mindset in terms of, hey, I'm not sure that I'm like really keen on this, because if you're not convinced or feeling compelled to stick with this, you probably won't see success with it. That's just the fact of the matter. Where if you're willing to walk through this and kind of hash out the challenges that come, but also overcome them with strategies, I do think you guys will start to see some wins. So I mentioned to Cecilia, I'm happy to talk to her individually, because I think every family has their own hurdles. And I know for this family, you know, with him eating well at daycare, sometimes dinner is just not a good meal. You know, I would say majority of my clients, if the kid is, you know, school age or under, which most of them are, dinner is the worst meal of the day, hands down, with every client. It's just, one, I think the foods we offer tend to be a little bit more adventurous than what we give our kids. It's kind of the standby. You know, in our head, we kind of think of like, oh, if I have a week's worth of breakfast, I can just rotate through those. If I have a week's worth of lunch ideas, I can rotate through those. Rarely ever do we repeat the exact same dinners every week indefinitely. And so you think like kids are being exposed to a lot more variety in a lot of different forms. It's late, they might be tired. And truth be told, they might have already ate their fill for the day. A lot of kids just don't have a huge appetite at dinner. And so that might be compounding some of this, is that without as much practice at breakfast and lunch, when it comes to dinner, there's not a lot of appetite. So whatever appetite there is, naturally, this little boy probably just wants to eat only the Levitt foods. That being said, I would continue to offer those Learning It foods, because again, if we don't offer it, we're guaranteed to see our child not eat it. And so if we can do family style meals, put it before the child and help them to at least get tolerating it first at the table, and then hopefully on their plate and interacting with it and moving through the steps to eating, I think that that we will start, you know, that I would like to see that this child would start to make a little bit of progress. But as I said, like with my oldest, she took a long time, and it's not with every food. Some foods go from like tolerating to loving and eating very quickly. Like it's just like overnight something switches. A lot of foods, and if you guys follow like my rainbow challenge right now, like a lot of rainbow foods just are a very gradual process, but we get there. And so it does take some consistency. But Cecilia, if you listen to this and you have questions, you want to talk about them on a one-on-one basis so that I can kind of help understand your situation, give you specific suggestions, I'm happy to do that. But, okay, so we had a decent number of questions today. I think we covered them all. But for those on the call, do you guys have any specific questions that you guys want to ask right now before we hop off? Anyone? Let's see. I'm going to stop the share and pull up the chat box. Patty, Sandy, Julie. I
have a question, but it might not be relevant for everybody, so I can do it another time.
That's okay. I don't think it doesn't sound like anyone else has questions.
Okay, I've been watching your posts about like baby-led weaning with your youngest, and I'm guessing a lot of this with my older daughter is like temperament, but I just am curious if you have any advice or experience around like kind of doing it differently the second time around. Like, is there anything I should be doing differently, you know, with my second that you've learned from after having 3 kids? And
yeah, no, I think that's really relevant to a lot of families probably, because I think with all of us we see, and I know I've spoke with Patty about this, you know, all of our kids are going to have different temperaments. I think we all see that very quickly. And that applies to their feeding temperaments. I mean, a lot of times, like my oldest, this is kind of her temperament with a lot of things. She's just much more cautious than my second one. Like she's just, that's her personality type. She's much more sensitive. Like, you know, just as we know that we have to, you know, parent each specific kid a little bit uniquely, the same way happens with this. So I would say like the division of responsibility works for all kids. I mean, whether they're lean and failure to thrive and need to gain weight, or whether they're a child who, you know, is the opposite end of the spectrum and really high on the growth curve, and later on in life, you know, there's concerns more for like their overweight or obesity. No matter what age, size, and, you know, personality type the child is, the division of responsibility can work for them. That said, in terms of things I would do differently, the biggest one would just be starting to implement this faster. Most families don't learn about the division of responsibility until they're having problems with their first. Very few learn about it as kind of their starting out, feeding approach. And so I would recommend, like, as quickly as you can, just really start practicing this. How old is your second?
7 months.
Okay, yeah, so right around Owen's age. So I think, right now it's kind of the sweet spot of, like, they're just cute and messy and chubby and things like that. But, like, soon we're going to start seeing a lot more, like, temperament start to show, especially at feeding. We're going to start to catch ourselves being like, oh, they don't like that, and things like that. And I think that's when we instantly, like, I started doing Love It Like in Learning. It was Claire when she was like 15 months. And so I did start with her pretty early, but I've obviously, like, been practicing it for the last 4 years with her. And so I understand it a lot more now. But I would say the quicker that we can start implementing it, the better. But I think we'll also see, especially when families have more than one kid, they also realize where they just have to be really neutral, because we can't cater to just one child, like, especially the pickier child, so to speak. We have to have a feeding approach that works for the whole family. So I would say, like, this gives you really good practice because your older one, is kind of running you through this process a little bit more. That then when your younger one hits a feeding stage where, if he does, or it's a little boy, Julie, a little boy, little girl.
Yep, girl. Yeah.
Okay, little girl. So when, if and when she starts to show little signs of pickiness, you know how to address them head on from the get-go before kind of accommodating or adjusting or doing different things. You kind of know, like, this is just the feeding framework that we use for our family. Does that help? I feel like it's kind of a vague answer, but does that help at all?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if there's no other questions, I will send out this recording. And just let me know in the chat box for next week. Next week's conversation, the homework is going to talk about what to do if your kid only eats Love It foods. So I know that's a common question and probably is coming up as you guys work through this process. So just post your questions if you have them. Send me an email if you need to. And hopefully it will be a good week for you guys. Okay. Thank you all.